Music and technology grow side by side. Expansions in technology lead to new instruments, new sounds, new ways to record music, and for ambitious students, new ways to learn and practice. In this video, I want to share with you one of the most incredible resources that I have ever found as a guitarist and how I personally implement it into my practice. And more importantly, I want to demonstrate how working with scales can convert directly over to creating music. Too often, music students forget that scales are supposed to be musical, and they end up just playing them up and down and with patterns, and kind of lose sight of the forest through the trees. So there's going to be quite a bit of time in this video spent on translating and converting simple scale patterns into direct musical ideas. Now, a few things before we get started. Number one, this is completely free. You don't have to pay a cent for this. And number two is that this is not an ad. It's going to look like an ad, but I just really think this is a great piece of software. It's totally free. Full disclosure, the guy who made this is named Gary. He runs the YouTube channel Design Course, and he is a fan of my channel. He's actually donated to my channel before, and that's how this app showed up on my radar. But me personally, I'm just excited to show this off and what I made with it, because I've been waiting so long for an app that looks this good and behaves this well. There's a lot of imitations like this online. You can find all sorts of things that kind of do what this app is doing, but I don't feel like any of them do it as well and do it as pretty and do it as functionally as this one does. So let's get started. Normally, if you're looking to learn a new scale, you might do something like just look it up in a book that you own. But if that's not an option, you might just Google a scale chart pattern. And sorting through the images, you'll often find that a single scale can be played many different ways. Getting the scale shapes that you want in the size that you want with the notations that you want can be difficult or impossible through Google just alone. And that's where Fretastic shines like none other. Fretastic is an online dynamic scale generator featuring dozens of available scale types that can be customized to your own preference. This can look like a lot at first, but let's just take a look at how it might actually be used. Let's say you really enjoyed my video on the Phrygian dominant scale and wanted to start playing around with it more. Click Scale and select Phrygian dominant. Now, select a key. I'll choose E. Immediately, every single note of the E Phrygian dominant scale is displayed on the guitar's fretboard. And once again, this can be kind of overwhelming, and I don't find it very helpful to see all of this information at once. So instead, I'm going to change the fingering system from none to 3 notes per string. This gives me a practical and playable scale shape for E Phrygian dominant. Now, I personally don't need to see this much of the fretboard, so I'll size it down a little bit by just adjusting these sliders. Now I can see a narrow area of the fretboard, which is easier for me to look at, but I can still see on either side of it if I want to expand my scale shapes. For example, this is E Phrygian dominant in its first position, starting off of the first note, E. But I could display its second shape, starting on its second note by clicking the number 2 under position. Similarly, I could see its 7th shape, which starts on its 7th note, by clicking on the number 7. Clicking back to none, we can now see how these 3 shapes actually connect to one another. Now let's go back to that first shape again, and take a look at how our chord tones and roots are actually displayed. Right now, the root notes of the scale, E, are shown in white, and the red notes indicate the notes of our tonic chord, which would be an E major chord. When improvising with a scale, it's highly advised to be outlining the chord tones of individual chords in the key, and just outlining E major while playing E Phrygian dominant can sound great. Now, if you find these colors distracting, you can just turn them off by clicking these checkboxes. So let's say I want to start practicing the scale. Well, obviously, you could just grab your metronome and go up and down, practice different scale patterns, but I personally enjoy just jamming out with a new scale. It gives me a good idea of what it actually feels like and what it can behave like. I think of it as like finger painting. You're just kind of getting your hands dirty, and you might not make a great piece of art out of it, but at least you got the idea of what the colors actually do. And awesomely enough, Fretastic has built-in jam tracks with YouTube integration. If I click backing tracks and then find my tonic, E, it gives me several different choices of tracks. And fortunately, one of them is in E Phrygian dominant, and it's from my good colleague Chus. And with this track going, I'm free to experiment up and down the scale and really get an idea of what it sounds like. Now do be careful. A lot of jam tracks say something like it's in the key of D minor, but they'll include chords that might come from D Dorian. So I do recommend, if you're jamming over a track, to do some investigation into the chords of that track, because sometimes the jam track composer might leave out some information about some chords that are actually outside of a key, and that can really throw you off if you're new to this. There's a few other features that I didn't mention, like the ability to add an extra string if you're playing on a 7-string, and the ability to easily print out your customized charts and hang them wherever you like. And honestly, with all these features, you should be able to save yourself quite a bit of money on books and apps and different resources because, I mean, let's face it, if you buy a scale dictionary book, you can't even customize that. It's going to give you preordained scale shapes. It's not going to let you, see it the way you want to see it or the shapes that you want. This is much more versatile. And the fact that you can just print it out, you can save it, you can screenshot it, you can do whatever you want with it, totally free, I think that's pretty awesome. Now, for me personally, I love learning new scales and playing with them to see how they feel. What are the effects that they create? But learning a new scale doesn't necessarily mean memorizing a new scale. I have learned my bebop scales before, but I cannot confidently say that I have them memorized. So for somebody like me, this tool is very helpful to just kind of get my hands dirty and start playing around with scales that I'm familiar with. I decided to start playing around with my B bebop dominant scale. You can think of this as just being a major scale that also has a flat 7th in it, or a Mixolydian scale that has a natural 7th in it. That means this scale has 8 notes. And we can also see that these 4 notes are just a half step apart, creating some nice chromaticism when we ascend and descend through the scale. Now there's a lot to talk about regarding bebop scales, so I just posted a 30-minute lesson for my Patreon subscribers regarding bebop scales and jazz basics. If you're a subscriber, check that out. For this video, I just want you to keep in mind that the bebop scale really sounds great over a dominant 7th chord. So if I'm playing a B bebop scale, then I should think about playing a B7 underneath that. So all I did was fire up Ableton 9, and then I recorded myself playing a B7 with some finger picking, and then the occasional E7 for a 4 chord, and an F-sharp 7 for the 5. After that, I added some MIDI drums to help keep the beat. Then I plopped down a bass line that really just started off by me singing through what I was hearing in my head. And now I had a pretty decent canvas upon which I could paint with my bebop scale. I spent some time just noodling around with this shape. And then eventually I wrote this lick that I kept playing very sloppily, so I just kept practicing it until I could get it somewhat clean. Now I really can't resist harmonized guitars, so I wrote a harmony a third up and recorded that. But since I'm harmonizing chromatics here, I did have to include a note outside of our bebop scale, so this isn't easily as recognizable as a bebop shape. But I really liked the way that sounded. It started reminding me of an Humphreys McGee song or something by Fish. So I pulled up a notepad and started typing out some lyrics, coming up with melodies. After that, I sent the song to Beardstank, and he recorded a drum part and sent it back to me, which instantly gave the track more life. Then I asked Mike Mugley, aka Moog Lee, for some piano parts, and he sent them back to me in a Reason 11 file. Now, I use Reason 10, so I took this as a welcome opportunity to have to upgrade to Reason 11. Unfortunately, upon purchasing Reason 11, I found out it was no longer compatible with Ableton 9, so I reluctantly shelled out the cash to upgrade Ableton 9 to Ableton 10. Then, upon opening my new software, I found out that about half my tracks were deleted. Additionally, all my VST plugins were missing, and my interface decided to stop communicating with my computer altogether. Now, we've already seen that technology can be a musician's best friend, but it can also be our worst enemy. These sort of technical interruptions into our creative pursuits can really put the brakes on things, and at worst, they can even spoil your projects completely if you allow them. But I'm telling you, you better get used to it. These sorts of technical hurdles are going to pop up over and over and over again. They're nothing new, and you will have to learn to develop the problem-solving skills to solve the problems and to just keep trooping through without getting too depressed. But like I said, this is not a new issue. For as long as there's been music, there has been technical hurdles. There has been strings that didn't stay in tune. There have been instruments that weren't resonant enough or that didn't, produce the right intervals. When you used to produce on tape, you had to cut tape and slice it. You only had 4 tracks. You had, tube amplifiers that would burn out. So, is it a pain that I have to reinstall my plugins? Yes, but there have always been technical interruptions. So never let that be the excuse for why your song died. Because, we've had 200 years of music production, and that has never been a valid excuse. We've always had the problem of technical interruptions. They will always exist. So just deal with it. Get used to it. Develop the skill to troop through those problems. And if it's too hard for you, find some people in your life so that you can depend on that can solve those problems for you. Anyways, with my new software finally humming along nicely, I was able to get Mike's piano track finally working in my song. Then I was able to re-record my missing bass guitar, my missing guitar parts, and redo my vocal parts with a few small changes.
Motherland, look how all of the plants must grow.
Now, what I'm about to play for you isn't a full song, but I will turn it into a full song, and that'll be an easy transformation. Just a few slight modifications, some judicious repetitions, and we've got an entire track on our hands. But I want you to keep in mind, as you listen to this, that this entire track was born out of just noodling with a scale. That's an important concept to keep in mind, that all of these ideas can really just come about through practicing a simple scale.
Tell if you knew about the new gone away. You stood there and looked at me like I had nothing of importance to say, and we flew away. Yeah, we flew away. Soaring high above the motherland, look how all of the plants must grow. Live, see how all the electrons flow, but they don't know. We've been living in the atmosphere where the stars are near, yeah. And we've been sneaking through the grass and trees and the dried up leaves, oh. But if they ever find a way up here to where the air is clear, then we can tell them hello.
Alright, now a few things before we close out. First off is the bebop scale in general. This is generally a jazz scale, and you can hear I'm not using it for very jazzy purposes in this video. And that's fine. That's what style does. That's what influence does. I come from more of a rock upbringing and a progressive rock upbringing. So, as far as my musical career is concerned, those are the influences that crept in there as opposed to thinking of a jazz style. If I was more jazz-oriented, that probably would have sounded a lot jazzier, but it's just important to see how two different players, two different musicians can take the same set of notes and create completely different styles of music out of it. So when you hear something like bebop scale, I don't want you to just immediately think jazz scale. Yes, it's a jazz scale, but I don't think anything you just heard was a jazz song. It just happened to utilize a jazz scale. So don't pigeonhole these scales too much as far as what they're capable of. Keep in mind that you have infinite freedom as far as what you're going to make that scale do. And also shout out to Ben Levin. I'm not sure if you watch Ben Levin's YouTube channel, but I'd watched a few of his videos the other day, and they were just really inspiring to watch. I love his art style, the kind of music he makes, how, you know, free form it is, and that kind of music style was running through my head, as well as, you know, Humphreys McGee, Fish, and I was also thinking Ben Levin, his art style especially. So if it feels a little Ben Levin-ish, I'll take that as a compliment, but I know that I was definitely being influenced through his art style and his teaching style and his music style. If you haven't watched this stuff, it's really, really enjoyable. Please check him out. And lastly, thank you to Gary Simon from Design Course for making this awesome piece of software for all of us to use. I just think it's excellent. I think it's great that he's not charging for it. You know, I'm sure there's a business model attached there somewhere later on down the line, but hey, at least the core component of it is just free for us to use. And like I said, I've seen people try to attempt these things all over the place. I've tried to make stuff like this, and it never goes well. Regardless, thanks to Gary Simon for making this possible. And really, I mean, through that app, I've got a new song. I'm going to finish that and turn that into a new song, and that's awesome. You know, inspiration can come from something just like a practicing resource. So I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope you learned something. If you enjoyed this video, please thank my awesome Patreon supporters for supporting and sponsoring these videos. Like I said, I don't do ads. This was not an ad. Really, my only advertisement are for the awesome people that are supporting this channel. So thanks to them. If you'd like to join them, you can. There is a link below in the description. But if you can't do that, I would appreciate a like or a subscribe or a comment. All that kind of stuff really helps me out. So thanks for watching, and I will see you next time.